My son said it just like that, calm, clear, like it didn't bother him at all. We all agreed it's best if you don't come to Ethan's wedding. No pause. No stutter. Just cold, like the floor in winter. I was standing right next to the dining table, where I had just finished wrapping the quilt I'd made for Ethan and his fiancée, now his wife, I guess. It was a cream-colored quilt, hand-stitched, with a small piece of my old nursing uniform sewn into one corner. Just a quiet little tribute to the nights I sat by Ethan's hospital bed while he struggled to breathe, sounding like a tired, wheezing accordion. I didn't ask who we all was. I already knew. Lisa's voice was probably in the background, guiding him through the call like she always does. And Ethan, my sweet boy who once begged me for bedtime stories, he must have just nodded along. I guess they didn't want me ruining their perfect little wedding pictures. I didn't cry, not right then. I just stared at the wedding gift I had wrapped so neatly. It sat there with that shiny silver ribbon, just like the kind Ethan used to tie around his toys when he played cowboy. It glowed under the kitchen light, almost like it was mocking me. "Well," I whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "that's a shame." Then I hung up. Stood still for a while, holding the phone in my hand. It was still warm. My fingertips buzzed, not from anger yet, just from the silence. That thick, heavy kind of quiet that fills a room after someone slams a door. My eyes wandered to the dress I'd picked out, still hanging on the back of the hallway door. It was pale lavender, knee-length. Soft fabric that wouldn't show my age spots. Sleeves just long enough to cover the bruises from the blood thinners. I even bought new shoes, low heels in a soft gray. I didn't want to look young or skinny. I just wanted to feel noticed. But they made it clear, I wasn't invited. I wasn't wanted. I walked to the living room and gently placed the quilt on the chair. My hands moved on their own, folding it again, smoothing the edges. I stopped for a second when my fingers touched a square made from Ethan's old swim team shirt. That fabric was hard to sew, it was stiff from chlorine, but I wanted it in there. I remembered sitting in the bleachers at his meets, holding a thermos of cocoa, knees aching, but always there. I never missed one. I sank into my recliner, slow and creaky, like my joints. The silence was still there, buzzing. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly, tick, tick, tick. And I wondered, what did I do? What mistake did I make that was so big, so terrible, that they'd rather leave me out of my only grandson's wedding? Was I too slow for Lisa? Did I smell too much like lavender or Vicks? Had I held Ethan's hand too long the day he stopped by after his car accident? I remember once, back when Lisa still smiled at me, I asked her if she thought I was overbearing. She gave a short, flat laugh and said, "No, Evelyn. Just traditional." And that was it. Her polite way of saying I was too much and not enough at the same time. When I heard the mail drop through the slot, it startled me. I got up, my bones popping like old floorboards. There was only one envelope, thick and white. The invitation. My hand shook as I opened it. Lisa had it printed on fancy pearl paper. Her name was printed above Ethan's, like she was the star. My name wasn't anywhere. Not even in the corner. Not even as an afterthought. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, under my chamomile-scented sheets, staring at the ceiling. The fan above spun in slow circles, whispering like a warning. The quilt was still folded over the chair, waiting. Like me, just sitting there, wanting to be useful, wanting to be loved. I had sewn that quilt for months. Every stitch held a memory. I used bits of Ethan's childhood, his drawings, the fabric from the summer he and James built a treehouse, a square from the old flannel blanket we wrapped him in during his asthma spells. He used to say, "Gran, you make things better." I guess I don't anymore. By morning, I wasn't crying. My eyes were dry, but my mouth tasted like metal. That's how grief feels sometimes. It doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes, it just sits heavy behind your ribs like a clenched fist. I sat in my kitchen, wrapped in my shawl, holding a mug of peppermint tea. It was too warm for sweaters, but I needed something to hold. The quiet in that house didn't feel peaceful, yet felt like a punishment. I'm not sure why I got up and opened that box in the hall closet. Maybe it was habit. Or maybe I needed to feel something else. Inside were Ethan's old letters, the ones he wrote to me from summer camp. I'd saved every letter Ethan ever sent me from college. Tied them up in rubber bands, sorted by year, each one dated in my own small handwriting. "Dear Gran," he wrote, "thanks for the cookies. Dad never sends stuff like that. Gran, I can't sleep. Lisa's mad again. I miss how things felt at your house. Don't tell Dad, but I think you're the only person who really sees me." I ran my fingers over those words like they were raised on the page. Every line felt like a little bruise reopening. I'd been there for every breath of that boy's life, for every asthma attack, every broken heart, every late-night whisper when he didn't know who else to talk to. And now I was too embarrassing to be seen with him? The kettle clicked. off behind me, making me jump. I poured another cup of tea, this time with honey, but even that soft sweetness couldn't take away the heavy feeling inside. I walked back to the mantel and picked up the wedding invitation again. It still shimmered, perfect and polished. Lisa's name right at the top. Mine? Nowhere. Like I'd been wiped off the family tree. I've stayed quiet so many times, just trying to keep the peace. I let them cancel Christmas dinners and call it a scheduling thing. I stayed quiet when Lisa wrinkled her nose at my Tupperware and said she only used glass. I didn't say a word when Mark forgot my birthday, twice, but made a whole Facebook post about Lisa's father. I even swallowed my pride when Lisa said I was lucky to live in an old house with no mortgage. But this was different. This wasn't a quiet snub. This one cut deep. This one had teeth. I looked at the invitation, then at the quilt, sitting neatly folded on the chair. My breath caught. My hands curled into fists on the table, thin skin, yes, but still strong when they needed to be. I won't be erased quietly, I said. Out loud. And this time, my voice didn't shake. Once I'd calmed, I walked slowly over to the old secretary desk in the corner. I hadn't opened that drawer in years. Inside was James' ledger, black leather, worn at the edges, and smelling faintly of old tobacco and dust. He used to keep track of every single penny, spent or saved. That was his way of loving us. Quiet. Simple. Honest. Tucked in the back, I found the trust papers I had almost forgotten. When James died, we set up a trust for Ethan, not fancy, but solid. Something to help when he got married one day. But here's what they didn't know, I was the only trustee. James had insisted on that. You'll know when he's ready, he told me. And if he's not, you'll protect him from what he can't see. They didn't know that. They thought I was just the quiet old woman who folded napkins and didn't say much in the family group chat. I traced my fingers over the thick linen paper. There it was, clear as day. The trust would only be given out at the discretion of the trustee at the time of legal union. That was me. I had the final say. And they had no clue. I set the folder down gently, let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The house creaked in the evening quiet, and the grandfather clock behind me ticked on like always, tick, tick, tick. Time doesn't wait for anyone. But now, I had something they didn't. I had leverage. I hadn't touched those papers since James passed. I remembered that meeting like it was yesterday. Ethan had just turned 10. Mark's leg bounced nervously. Under the table. Lisa didn't come, said she was too busy. James had taken my hand and squeezed it. If I'm not here, Evie will know what to do, he said. She's the steady one. I hadn't felt steady in a long time. But now, holding that folder with its stamped papers and worn edges, I felt something again. That same kind of strength I used to feel after long hospital shifts, when I'd peel off my scrubs, sit down in the kitchen, and figure out how to make ends meet with nothing but a calculator, a grocery list, and grit. I hadn't felt powerful in years. But I could feel it now, humming just under my skin. A quiet kind of power. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Lisa, with all her polished smiles and Pinot Grigio, had no idea. Mark, who hadn't asked how I was since Christmas, had no idea. And Ethan, bless his heart, he probably thought trust funds came with cake and candles. But every single dollar sat under my thumb. And that thumb? It was tired of being stepped on. I didn't rush. That would have made it about being angry. And I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was clear. I walked to the hallway cabinet and opened it. Inside were James' old file boxes. I'd labeled each. One myself, years ago, house. Medical. Ethan. College. Trust. My handwriting, neat and blue. Just like I used to write Ethan's name on his lunchbox, always in blue. Used to do after hard days at the hospital. Just a small bunch, nothing fancy. Tulips, this time. Pink and white, drooping slightly in the early heat. The clerk wrapped them in brown paper and string, and I tucked them into the crook of my arm like a promise. Back home, I set them in the tall glass vase, the one with the chip in the rim, and placed them on the kitchen table, right in the patch of sun that always warmed the wood. The house was quiet. Not heavy anymore, not like before. Just still. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window. Carla was right, of course, they'd find out soon. They'd read the clause. They'd call. Maybe they'd yell. Maybe Lisa would send one of her careful emails, the kind that feel like legal documents in a silk blouse. Maybe Mark would try to guilt me with half-remembered childhood stories, or Ethan would sound hurt, confused, that soft bewilderment in his voice like he never imagined Gran would draw a line. Let them. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to explain what they'd failed to see. I'd lived long enough to know when love had conditions, when welcome had terms and expiry dates. I hadn't asked for anything except the truth. To be invited. To be there. To wrap my gift around their new beginning and be part of the life I'd helped build. And when they made it clear I wasn't wanted, I hadn't begged. I hadn't shouted. I had simply remembered who I was. The trustee. The woman who had held that boy's head through fevers and fears. The one who stitched memories into quilts and picked out lavender dresses with sleeves that covered the bruises. The steady one. The clock ticked on the mantel. The quilt still sat on the chair, folded just so. I'd keep it there for now. One day maybe Ethan would remember where comfort really came from. One day he might show up, not with guilt or excuses, but with honesty. And if that day came, I'd be here. Not waiting. Not hoping. Just being. As I always had. I took a slow sip of tea, the taste of honey still on my tongue, and let the silence stretch around me, no longer a punishment. Just peace. Back when Ethan used to get sick, I always brought flowers to brighten up the room. It was something small that made heavy days feel a little lighter. This time, I picked yellow lilies and soft white freesia. The woman at the flower shop asked if it was for a special occasion. I smiled and said, "No, it's just time." She looked confused, but I didn't explain. I didn't need to. When I got home, I placed the flowers in the glass vase James's mother had given us on our first anniversary. The water sparkled under the kitchen light. Then I noticed the answering machine, blinking red. One message. I pressed the button, expecting it to be Mark again. But it wasn't. It was Lisa. "Hi, Evelyn," then a pause. "Well, we heard you might have made some changes to things. Of course, that's your choice, but maybe you didn't understand what's really going on. Anyway, call us back. We'd like to talk." Her voice didn't sound natural. She was trying to sound polite, but underneath, it was like she was bracing for a slap. I didn't call her back. Instead, I picked up the wedding invitation still sitting by the unfinished quilt. The RSVP card was tucked inside, blank. I took a pen and wrote in the smallest, neatest handwriting, "Declines with regret." Not to be mean, but to be clear. Then I slid it back into the envelope and set it on the counter. They can have their perfect wedding, fancy wine, fairy lights, drone shot videos of the kiss. Let them smile for the camera. But they can do it without my money, and without me. That evening, I took my tea out to the porch. The honeysuckle was blooming, sweet in the air. Ruth used to say it smelled like Sunday dresses and breath after choir. I sat gently rocking, quilt in my lap, fingers resting on a soft patch made from Ethan's old swim shirt. The fabric felt smooth and worn, faded by time, but still true. In the distance, a sprinkler turned on with a soft hiss. The wind chimes sang quietly. For a moment, I almost felt peace, like I could let the sadness go. Almost. Because even though I had made my decision, and believe me, I had, the ache still lived deep in my chest. I didn't want to miss Ethan's wedding. But I wasn't going to beg for a spot in a family that had tossed me aside like a lonely earring that didn't match. They wanted quiet. What they got was a woman with a backbone, and a pen. Later that night, I found myself flipping through my old recipe cards. I pulled out Ethan's favorite, my cornbread dressing. Every Thanksgiving, he'd always ask for seconds, then sneak back for thirds when Lisa wasn't looking. The card was smudged from years of use, the corners curled like old wallpaper. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. Instead, I folded it up and slipped it into a little envelope. On the outside, I wrote, "For when you remember who you are." I didn't sign it. I didn't mail it. Not yet. But I placed it on my desk, next to the ledger. Because maybe, just maybe, someday, Ethan will reach out. Not for money. But for the truth of who we were. And if that day comes, I want him to find something real waiting for him. Something better than silence. The next morning, another voicemail came in. It was Mark again. "Mom, we need to talk." His voice had changed. It wasn't angry or sharp anymore, just unsettled. Like something had shifted, and they could feel it. Ruth's call came a few days later. It was a Wednesday, late morning. I had just folded the warm towels from the dryer and was pouring a second cup of tea when the phone rang. "Evie," she said, and I knew by the way her voice cracked that something was wrong. "What is it, darling?" "I was at the salon today, Nancy's place, you know. Lisa goes on Wednesdays." I sat down real quiet, my knees creaking like that porch swing James never fixed. I was behind the partition. They didn't see me. My heart started to sink. She was there with that friend of hers, Trina. You know, the one with the voice like a hairdryer? They were talking about the wedding, and Lisa said your name. She said what? I whispered. She laughed, like it was no big deal. Then she said, the old lady finally got the message. She won't ruin the photos now. The room seemed to shrink around me. I held my mug tighter. She really said that? I asked. She did, Ruth whispered. And then, something worse. I didn't ask. I waited. she said. All it took was one little uninvite, and she folded like tissue paper. Honestly, I thought we'd get a fight. Guess even Evelyn knows when she's not wanted. I didn't cry. Not while Ruth was talking. Not while she kept saying she was sorry. I just listened, quiet as glass. And when the call ended, I stood there in the hallway for a long, long time. I rested my hand on the old maple doorframe, the one where Ethan used to mark how tall he was getting. You could still see the little pencil lines, though they'd faded with time. There he was, age 6, barely reaching my hip. And again at 12, all long legs and slouching shoulders, stuck in that awkward stage when his knees hurt and he hated the sound of his own voice. They'd rewritten our story, turned me into something I never was, a burden, an embarrassment, someone who didn't belong in the shiny, edited version of their lives. And Lisa, she handed that version of me to Ethan like it was part of the wedding gift bag. But that kind of hurt doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, like cold rain soaking through your shoes until you're shivering, lost, and not even sure how you got there. I walked into the living room. The quilt was still there, folded neatly on the couch. I'd stitched a tag onto the back in blue thread, to Ethan and Marissa, may this cover you in warmth and truth. I ran my hand over it one last time. Then, I picked it up, walked to the front door, and stepped outside. The sun was shining, calm and steady. A wind chime tinkled from the neighbor's porch. I set the quilt down by the curb, right next to the recycling bin. No ceremony. No tears. Just left it there. It looked out of place, something made with love sitting beside empty boxes and broken down cartons. But that's how they treated it. Not like a gift. Like clutter. Like a reminder of me they didn't want. Back inside, I leaned over the kitchen sink. The porcelain felt cool beneath my hands. The faucet dripped, slow and steady. And I thought about all the times I had shown up for them. Like when Ethan had that bad fever and Lisa couldn't miss her conference call, so I stayed by his side. Or when Mark hurt his back and I mowed their whole lawn. Or the time I spent 3 weeks baking Lisa's birthday cake from scratch, only for her to call it quaint. They forgot it all. Like chalk on a sidewalk washed away in the rain. But I remembered. I always would. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were loud and tangled, rushing like a river I couldn't block. So I turned to the thing that always helped me in hard times. I opened my journal, not the money one, the red leather one James gave me when Ethan was born. Write it down, he said, so you don't carry it all in your chest. I flipped through the pages. July 8, 1999, Ethan had another asthma attack tonight. He asked me not to tell his parents how scared he was. I held his hand until he fell asleep. April 14, 2006, took out $6,200 to pay for Ethan's first semester of college. Mark said they'd pay me back. They never did. December 12, 2011, brought over Hanukkah gelt. Lisa rolled her eyes and said, "We're not raising him too Jewish." Ethan looked confused. I said nothing. Entry after entry, I wasn't writing to be bitter, just honest. Quiet little records of love and truth. Then I added a new one, May 10, 2025, left the quilt on the curb. It's the first time I've ever let go of something I made with love. But also the first time I've seen what that love meant to them. I closed the journal. The pain in my chest didn't vanish, but it settled, like a bruise that's still sore, but no longer pounding. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. My hands didn't shake. That Sunday, for the first time in 42 years, I didn't go to church on Mother's Day. I couldn't sit through another sermon about grace and family when mine felt like something that used to be there, a missing limb that still ached. Instead, I stayed in my robe until noon. Watered the hydrangeas. Fed the squirrels. Alphabetized the spice rack just to feel like something was in order. That's when the knock came. Soft but sure. 3 taps. I knew it was Pastor Dale before. I even opened the door. He's been stopping by since James died. Never pushy, just present. Like a warm coat you didn't know you needed. I opened the screen door. "I'm not up for scripture today, Dale." He smiled, crooked and kind. "Good. I didn't bring any." He held up a brown paper bag. "But I did bring molasses cookies. From that little shop by the bank." I blinked. "You remembered." Of course I did. We sat in the den with the old green recliners and the fireplace that never worked. Right. I poured tea. He opened the cookies. After a few bites, he cleared his throat. "Ruth told me," he said gently. I didn't answer. "I'm not here to talk you into forgiveness," he said. "Or even peace, if I'm honest. I just wanted to sit with you. In the middle of it." That cracked something open in me. Not a dam, just a seam. I folded my napkin slowly. "You know what it's like," I said, "to feel erased in a house you helped build." Dale nodded, his eyes steady on mine. "Yes." And I believed him. So I told him everything, not just about the wedding, but about the slow shrinking over the years. About how Lisa whittled me down to a list of don'ts: don't comment on the kids' hair. Don't show up unannounced. Don't bring food without checking dietary preferences first. I told him how Mark used to call me after night shifts just to hear my voice, how, somewhere along the way, he stopped listening altogether. How I went from caregiver to inconvenience. I gave everything I had to that family, I whispered. Not because I expected anything back, but I didn't think I'd have to disappear just to make them comfortable. Dale let the silence settle. Then he said, they didn't push you aside because you failed them. They pushed you aside because you reminded them of where they came from, of what they owe. And they don't want to feel small. That hit me deep, somewhere behind the ribs. Because I'd felt it too, how Lisa stiffened whenever I mentioned hand-me-downs, how Mark flinched when I talked about James fixing the Dodge with duct tape and prayer. They'd outgrown their gratitude. But that didn't mean I was wrong for loving them when they were just beginning. Then Dale reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, palm-sized wooden cross. It was smooth, warm from his touch. I give these to folks who feel like they're drifting, he said. Not as a map, just as a reminder that you still have a center. He placed it gently in my hand. I think you've been strong a long time, Evelyn, he said. But I think now, you're clear. I looked down at the cross. It smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Clarity, I murmured. That's a dangerous thing for a woman my age, isn't it? Dale smiled. Only if the people around you prefer confusion. After he left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The tea had gone cold. The cookies sat half-eaten on the floral china James's mother left me. I touched the little wooden cross again. My eyes moved to the fridge, the church retreat magnets, the emergency numbers, the faded photo of Ethan on his first day of kindergarten. So much of my life had been lived in service to them, to their needs, their dreams, their schedules. I'd postponed trips, skipped dates, canceled surgeries. I'd saved my best stories for Ethan's visits, always hoping he'd see me again. Really see me. And still, they said I was too much. Later that evening, I opened my cedar chest. Inside were the letters James wrote to me while we were courting, neatly stacked, tied with ribbon, yellowing at the edges. I unfolded the first one. It began, Evie, you are not a burden. You are the fire in the hearth. I laid my hand across the page. My wedding ring was still warm from the sun. Not a burden. Not a shadow. Not a placeholder. The fire in the hearth. That night, I slept deeply. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of the wedding. I dreamt of standing barefoot in the yard. Ruth was beside me, laughing. A breeze tugged at the laundry line while the wind chimes sang their soft, familiar tune. 2 days later, I put on my walking shoes, the navy pair with the padded arch, and left the house just after breakfast. The birds were loud. The air smelled like wet bark and warm grass. On Carla's porch, a little pot of marigolds bloomed, stubborn and bright, just like Ruth's lipstick on Sundays. Carla opened the door before I could knock. You ready? She asked. I nodded. We didn't waste time on small talk. She knew. I think she'd been waiting for me to arrive in my own time. Not before. That's the thing about a good lawyer, and a good friend. They know when to hold your hand, and when to hand you the pen. We sat at her desk, the same one where I'd updated the trust. But this felt bigger. Not because of money. Because of meaning. Take your time, Carla said. This is legacy level. I let out a soft, low laugh. My legacy used to be sticky notes in Ethan's lunchbox. She smiled. Still counts. I opened the folder. The old will still listed Mark and Lisa as the primary heirs, first the house, then the rest of the savings, the bonds, the life insurance. And here's the part no one tells you when you're old, darling, the people who measure your love by the square footage of your living room are always doing the math. But I'd done the math too. And it added up to one thing: enough silence, enough shrinking. Enough being counted out by the people I'd counted on most. I was done waiting around to be included in the life I'd helped build. Carla handed me the draft. Right at the top, it read, Evelyn May Whitmore, Last Will and Testament, revised. I read every word slowly, making sure I understood it all. Then I picked up my pen and made the changes that needed to be made. I crossed out Mark and Lisa completely, no more shares, no loopholes, nothing left for them. Instead, I added real gifts. Half of everything would go to the women's shelter, a quarter to the local food bank, and the last quarter to a scholarship fund for nursing students. As for the house? I wanted that to go to the community youth program, the one that helps kids leaving foster care. Let them have a place to settle down, somewhere strong and safe, I said. Carla looked surprised at first, then nodded. That's beautiful, Evelyn. It's mine to give, I said as I signed my name, steady. And sure, no trembling this time. By the time I walked out of her office, the sun was high, and the air felt hot. But something inside me felt lighter. Not happy exactly, just relieved, like I'd finally put down a heavy load I'd been carrying for too long. At home, I brewed some rosehip tea and sat at the kitchen table. There was no blinking light on the answering machine, no phone calls taken back, no guilt trips waiting. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels good. That night, I opened the red ledger again. On May 12, 2025, I rewrote my will. I erased the people who had erased me. Then I shut the book and left it on the windowsill. The breeze from the open window cooled the heat in my chest. There's a big difference between anger and clarity. Anger is hot and fast and burns out quick. Clarity is slow and steady, it builds a path forward. The next morning, I visited my friend Ruth. She was out in her garden, trimming her roses, straw hat pushed back on her head. "You look like you just walked out of a courtroom drama," she said, eyeing my neat blouse. "Close enough," I laughed. We sat on her porch, sipping lemonade from old jelly jars, just like we did when our kids were little and our hair was still brown. I told her everything. Every detail, every decision, every quiet click of the lock. She didn't say a word while I spoke. Just listened, nodding. Her lips pressed into that line I knew meant she was proud and a little bit heartbroken for me. When I finished, she let out a deep breath. "Well," she said, "I'd say justice has better manners in your hands." That made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in a long while. "Do you think I'm being cruel?" I asked. She looked at me, sharp but kind. "No. I think you finally stopped giving to people who only ever came to take." That night, I watched the news with the sound low and the window open. I've always loved the smell of freshly cut grass and someone else's barbecue drifting through the air. I sat with my knitting in my lap, not a baby blanket, not a Christmas gift, just a pattern I liked, made just for me. The phone rang. Once. Then twice. I let it go to voicemail. Then I turned it off completely. Because peace, real peace, doesn't come from who calls. It shows up when there's no one left you feel you have to answer to. The knock came on a Saturday. No warning. No message. Just a hard rap on the screen door like I was a stranger in my own home. I didn't hurry. I took my time tying my robe, setting my tea down, and peeking out the side window. I recognized that silhouette right away. Mark. He looked too polished, like he'd spent extra time making himself look good. I opened the door just a crack. "Hi, Mom," he said. It had been months since he'd looked me in the eye, and now he couldn't stop. "Didn't expect to see you," I said. "I was just driving by." "With Lisa's Lexus?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He gave a sheepish laugh. "Yeah. We were out, thought we'd check in." "Where is she?" He hesitated. "She thought it'd be better if I came in alone." I nodded slowly. Damage control." His face tightened. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. Just opened the door wider and walked back to the kitchen. I poured myself another cup of tea. I didn't ask if he wanted any. He followed me, just like he used to when he was a little boy, always asking what was for dinner. Only now he was 52, and I wasn't making casseroles for grown men who couldn't say thank you. He sat at the table, tapping the edge of a placemat I quilted back in 1984. I let the silence sit. If he had something to say, he'd have to say it first. "I heard you made some changes," he finally said. I stirred my tea. "I did." "Mom, why? We could have talked about this." I looked up, calm and clear. "No, sweetheart. You talked for years." I listened. This time, it was my turn. He blinked. And for just a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who believed I could fix anything. Then, the mask came back. "You didn't have to cut us out, Mark." Said. "Didn't I?" I replied, calm but firm. He tensed. I set my teacup down. "Family's supposed to see each other, Mark. You didn't see me. You saw a future inheritance. A problem. Maybe even an embarrassment. That's not fair." "No," I said gently, "but it's true." He looked down and rubbed the back of his neck like a boy caught in a lie. "Lisa didn't mean what she said at the salon. Ruth was eavesdropping." I tilted my head. "And what about you? Did you mean it when you told me not to come?" He flinched. I thought it'd be easier for everyone." I raised. "You to do what's right, not what's easy." He didn't respond. Just stared down at the table like it might offer him a way out. Then, another knock, softer this time. I opened the door and there stood Ethan. My grandson. My boy. He looked different. Not older, just clearer, like someone who'd finally woken up and was still blinking away the sleep. "Gran," he said, his voice soft, his eyes searching. "Mine. Come in." He stepped in slowly, like the house was something sacred. When he saw his father sitting at the table, he paused. Mom sent me, he said carefully. She thought I might have better luck. Mark frowned. We don't need to gang up. Ethan shook his head. I'm not here for that. He turned to me. I just want to ask. Really ask. Is it true? You changed everything? I nodded. It's true. Why? He whispered. I motioned to the chair. He sat down, shoulders slumped, fingers tapping the edge of the mug I'd poured for him before he even walked in. You were my whole world, Ethan, I said gently. While your parents were busy polishing their image, I was making your childhood. I didn't think I had to explain that. He looked up, startled. I didn't know. His voice cracked. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I know, I said. Mark jumped in, sharp. Ethan, don't start apologizing, Ethan. Raised a hand to stop him. I'm not talking to you. He turned back to me. What happens now? I leaned back, arms crossed. I've made my choices, not out of anger, but because I had to protect myself. To finally love myself enough to stop chasing people who pushed me away. Ethan swallowed hard. Can we fix it? I took a long sip of tea. You all meant what you said. You shut me out. I won't force my way back in. If we're going to start over, it won't be because you feel guilty. It'll be because you want to be honest. Silence. Mark's jaw clenched. Ethan nodded. I understand, he said quietly. And I believed him. Mark stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. You're turning this into a show. No, I said, rising to my feet. You did that the day you made your mother feel like she didn't matter. His mouth opened, then shut again. I walked him to the door. Tell Lisa, I said, that the trust won't open with an apology card. It's locked, just like the door behind you. He stepped out into the bright sunlight, blinking like he couldn't believe the sun was still shining. I turned back. Ethan was still sitting at the table, his tea untouched. You can stay for lunch if you'd like, I offered. His voice caught. Please. We didn't talk much. He helped me slice tomatoes while I buttered the bread. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was honest, comfortable, like two people who didn't need to fill every gap with words. I made him grilled cheese the way he liked as a boy, extra cheddar, crusts cut off, with a little bowl of tomato soup for dipping. I remember this, he said, dunking the sandwich corner. I smiled. You used to call it Grandma Pizza. He chuckled softly, but his eyes didn't leave the plate. There was a question in them, something he'd been carrying since. He walked in. Can I see the photo albums? He asked. Of course, sweetheart, I said. Bottom drawer of the hutch. He went over and pulled them out, gentle like they were treasure. And honestly, they were. My holy books. Pages full of memories that didn't lie. He sat cross-legged on the rug and opened the first one. There he was on the cover, Ethan, age 4, holding a daffodil, dirt still clinging to the stem. I don't remember this, he said quietly. You had strep that week, I said. You were crying, but I got you outside in the sun. Told you flowers were the fastest medicine. He turned the pages slowly. Birthday parties. Halloween costumes. Science. Fairs. At first, he smiled. But as he kept flipping, the smile faded. Where are Mom and Dad in these? Ethan asked, I scanning the photo album. I sipped my tea. Busy, usually. Lisa was building her business. Mark traveled a lot. You stayed here most weeks, sometimes whole summers. He nodded slowly, still flipping through pages. I thought I remembered, but I guess I didn't. He turned to the next album, the high school years, first heartbreaks. A card slipped out from between two pages and landed in his lap. He picked it up. Crayon. Handwriting on thick, folded paper. Thank you for always staying up when I'm sick. I love you more than all the stars. Ethan, age 9. His fingers trembled. I didn't know I gave you this. You did. You handed it to me on the couch, still wheezing. Said you made it during lunch at school. He rubbed the card. Like it might disappear. Dad said, you were never really involved. That you liked to make things dramatic. I didn't say a word. Sometimes, the best way to break a lie is to let the truth sit next to it, undisturbed. He kept going now. Faster. Searching. Hoping. Postcards. Drawings. School notes. Evidence. At the back of the third album, he paused. Held up a photo from his high school graduation, he with his diploma, arms around me. I was crying, mascara smudged, smiling cracked but proud. Lisa wasn't in the frame. Mark stood off to the side, phone in hand. I remember this day. He said. You told me how proud James would have been. I meant it. He hesitated. I didn't know you helped pay for it. I didn't tell you. You had enough to carry. He blinked. You signed my loans? Yes. Your father said it wasn't the right time, financially. I disagreed. He looked down at himself, like trying to understand the boy he had been. Why didn't you ever say something? I was taught love isn't announced. It's lived. And then I saw it, the crack. A thin, hairline fracture slicing through the glossy version of me that Lisa painted and Mark protected. The trust clause had started it, but now it widened. Proof had done the rest: paper, pictures, memories they told him to forget. Ethan stood suddenly and walked to the secretary desk. I didn't stop him. He opened the top drawer and pulled out the red leather ledger. Page by page, he read. Slower this time: Ethan dental copay. Ethan swim camp fee. Ethan suit for prom. He stopped on the most recent entry. May 10, 2025, left the quilt on the curb. First time I've ever abandoned something I made with love. But it's also the first time I've seen what my love meant to them. He sat back down on the floor, ledger in hand like a confession. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't know how I let them talk me out of who you are. I set my cup down. My hands were shaking, not from grief, but from something slower and softer: relief. You were a boy, I said gently. And they were louder. He looked up, eyes full. I want to be louder now. Before he left, he hugged me, tight. The way he used to when he didn't have words for what he felt. You'll come back? I asked. If you'll let me. Always. He stepped off the porch into the late afternoon sun, and for the first time in years, I closed the front door and felt peace instead of loneliness. 2 days later, Ethan came back. He brought flowers, deep plum dahlias, the kind I used to grow in the side yard before my niece insisted, no more crouching. He remembered. That was his first apology. We didn't say much at first. Just tea again. A slice of banana bread, made with the last of the overripe ones. He sat at the kitchen table like he belonged there, and for a moment, it felt like time had pressed pause, like we were back in the quiet between swim meets and spelling tests. Then he looked up. Would you show me everything? I didn't ask what he meant. I just stood, went to the hallway, and pulled down the box. Heavier than I remembered, or maybe I was just older. My hands had once carried his feverish body across this house without a second thought. I set the box on the table and opened it. Inside, hospital bills from when Mark and Lisa didn't have insurance. Credit statements with charges I paid quietly. Co-signed loan documents for Ethan's first 2 years of college. Receipts from the apartment furniture Lisa borrowed during her promotion. A handwritten list of grocery runs I made during the recession. Post-it notes with. I sat at the kitchen table, slowly pulling out little scraps of paper, reminders. And receipts. Things like, pick up Ethan's inhaler, drop off care package to campus mail, or check on Tyler's braces. I laid them out next to each other like puzzle pieces, trying to make sense of it all. He looked at the papers, eyes wide. This is all you? He asked. I nodded. His voice shook. They always said you offered. That you insisted. I did, I said softly. Because I loved you. Because I wanted to help. But just because I offered doesn't mean they had the right to expect it forever. What they took wasn't help, it was entitlement. He picked up a receipt. His name was on it. His inhaler. My credit card. I never saw any of this, he whispered. No. I said. Because it was never for show. He leaned back, like the weight of everything finally hit him. How much did you give us over the years? I smiled, gentle now. Enough that I stopped counting. He really looked at me then. Eyes wide, lips parted. Gran, why didn't you tell me? I reached over and placed my hand on his. I rubbed my thumb over the spot I always did when he was little and scared. Because I thought love would speak for itself. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were wet with tears. I feel like I've been lied to. I didn't say anything. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't hearing the truth, it's realizing how long you've believed a lie. He reached back into the box and pulled out a birthday card I'd written him when he turned 12. Dear Ethan, it read. 12 years ago, you made me a grandmother. I didn't know my heart could stretch that wide. You're my sunshine on the darkest days. Love always, Gran. He wiped his eyes. They told me you didn't want to come to the wedding. That you were tired of being involved. I let out a breath, slow and tired. Sweetheart, I bought a dress 3 months in advance. I wrapped a quilt in silver ribbon. I only said no because I was told to stay away. He shook his head, trying to shake off the lies. I believed them. Yes, I said. You did. There was no anger in my voice. Just a kind of quiet sadness, and maybe a little hope, tucked away in the corners of it. He stayed for dinner. We didn't rehash the pain or dig through old wounds. We just made grilled chicken and rice. I showed him how to snip basil from the little pot by the window. Before he left, he asked if he could come again next week. I told him, the door's always open, if your heart stays kind. At the door, he paused. I don't know what to do now, he said. They're going to want me to take their side. I tilted my head and asked, are you ready to stop pretending that staying silent means being loyal? He stood still for a long time. Then he nodded. I think I am. Later that night, I sat on the couch. The photo albums were back on the shelf, the trust papers back in the drawer, the box sealed once again. I sipped my chamomile tea with honey and waited. Sure enough, the phone rang. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. Then Lisa's voice came through, not as sweet this time. Ethan's being difficult. Did something happen? We need to talk. I smiled. The cracks were showing, but not in me. In them. The real call came just before noon, while I was folding warm towels fresh from the dryer. Funny how something so small can feel like armor when you're bracing for a fight. The phone rang 3 times before I picked up. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted him to wait. Mom, Mark said sharply. We need to talk. I stayed quiet. I just got off the phone with Ethan, he said. He told me about the papers. The trust. Everything. I answered, calm and clear. Then there's nothing left to explain. He let out a short, bitter laugh. What the hell is going on? You're blowing up this family over one wedding? There it was. Just one wedding. One moment. One betrayal too far. I breathed in slowly. The scent of lavender and warm fabric still clung to the laundry basket at my hip. Mark, I said evenly, I haven't blown up anything. I've just finally stopped pretending. You're being irrational, he snapped. Vindictive. No, I said, each word steady like stones being laid down. I'm done being convenient. He paused. I could feel the heat of his silence, like a dog straining against its leash, not sure how far it could pull before something snapped. This isn't about Lisa, he said. Or Ethan. It's about you not knowing your place anymore. That did it. That was the moment. I set the basket down. Carefully. One folded dish towel at a time. And I let the silence settle thick between us. Mark went quiet after I said it, like he'd stumbled in the dark and realized he couldn't find the floor. I'm not ruining this, Mark, I told him, my voice calm. I just stopped pretending I was ever part of it. For a second, all I could hear was his breath catch in his throat. Then, you don't mean that. I do. He tried again, desperate now. We can fix this. Just undo the changes. Come to the wedding. Lisa will apologize. I stopped him right there. Don't offer me scraps, Mark. I baked your bread for 30 years. Then I hung up, not in anger, but with peace. It was done. I set the phone gently beside the vase of wildflowers Ethan had brought over last week. Some petals had wilted, curling in on themselves. Others still stood proud, blooming anyway. I walked into the living room and opened the red ledger. May 18, 2025. I wrote, Mark said, I don't know my place. I told him, I do. It's no longer beneath their feet. I closed the book with steady hands. No tears. Just a quiet stillness in the room, like the air before a summer storm. That afternoon, Ruth showed up with lemon bars and a fire in her eyes. He called me, she announced, marching straight into the kitchen. Wanted me to talk some sense into you. I handed her a napkin. Did you? She gave me a look. That said more than words. Darling, I told him, sense finally found you. We sat at the table, eating lemon bars dusted with powdered sugar that stuck to our fingers. I'm proud of you, she said. I'm proud of me too. I replied. We toasted with our tea like it was champagne. That night, I stood on the porch, watching the sun slide behind the trees. The neighbor kids were chasing fireflies, laughing and squealing, their joy filling the air. Life was still happening out there. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for someone to invite me back into it. Inside, the answering machine blinked again. Lisa this time. Her voice was tight, no fake sweetness left. Mark's very upset. Ethan's been different. Whatever you said to him, it's affecting the whole family. I didn't listen to the rest. I didn't need to. What they called damage, I called truth finally standing up straight. They were scrambling. And me? I was standing still. The meeting was set for Wednesday. Carla, my lawyer, arranged it, her office, neutral ground. She called it a formality. We both knew it was more than that. Mark insisted on being there. Lisa too. Ethan asked if I wanted him to come. I do. I said. But just to watch. Not to speak. He nodded. Then I'll be there. I wore my navy skirt and the white blouse with the lace collar, the one James always said made people listen. I pinned my silver locket at my throat. Inside was a photo of Ethan at 6, and one of James, taken the day we bought the house. The locket clicked shut like the end of a sentence, certain and final. Carla greeted me with her usual calm. She'd worn flats this time, practical shoes. I appreciated that. They're already here, she said gently, nodding to the back room. I stepped inside. Lisa was dressed head to toe in beige silk, legs crossed, smile tight and cold. Mark stood when I walked in, as if a polite gesture could fix what was broken. Ethan followed quietly and sat by the window, not even glancing at them. Carla got right to the point, which is why I trust her. This meeting is to review the updated legal documents regarding the Whitmore estate, she said. As directed by Evelyn Whitmore, sole executor and trust manager. She handed out copies, thick, neatly stacked. Lisa opened hers quickly, eyes darting across the pages like she was hunting for loopholes. Mark barely looked at his. So this is really happening, he muttered. No, I said gently. This already happened. What you're holding is just the proof. Lisa's mouth tightened. Mark leaned forward. You're leaving everything to charities? To strangers? I tilted my head. To kids aging out of foster care. To women escaping abuse. To families who go to bed hungry. If that's what you call strangers, maybe it's time you looked in the mirror. Lisa jumped in, voice sharp. We never meant to push you out. That was a misunderstanding. Carla didn't let it slide. Mrs. Whitmore's presence was required in the trust's terms. Her exclusion voided the agreement. That's not a misunderstanding. That's failure. To meet the conditions. Lisa's polished mask slipped. We thought she'd change her mind. It was supposed to be temporary. I was supposed to beg, I said, calm as ever. Mark clenched his fists. You're punishing us. No, I said, steady. I'm letting go of people who never saw me as more than a bank account. In a rocking chair. Ethan shifted in his seat, just enough to be noticed. Lisa turned to him. Ethan, say something. Say something, Lisa snapped. Tell her we can fix this. Ethan looked at me. Gran, may I? I gave a small nod. He turned back to them. She doesn't need to be fixed. You do. Mark's face darkened. Don't talk to us like that. I will, Ethan said, voice steady, if it's the only way you'll finally hear her. Lisa's voice rose. We included her. Dinners, birthdays, holidays, Ethan cut in. You invited her like a prop. Like a placeholder. You even edited her out of photos. Lisa paled. He looked at me again, eyes clear. I see it now. All of it. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. That was all I'd ever wanted, not revenge, not money. Just recognition. Carla's voice carried gently but firmly through the quiet. Unless there are legal objections, these documents will be filed with the county clerk tomorrow. The changes will be permanent and binding. Mark leaned back, hollowed out. Lisa crossed her arms. You're doing this out of spite, she accused. I stood slowly and placed my hand on the leather-bound ledger Carla had brought at my request. No, Lisa, I said. I'm doing this because love and loyalty should never be bought or betrayed. They should be earned and honored. I let that hang a moment. Then, which is why you're no longer included. Silence. The real kind. The kind that follows the final note of a song. I turned to Ethan. You can ride back with me if you'd like. He nodded, jaw tight, eyes full. As we left the room, I heard Mark say quietly, she really means it. And Carla replied. She always did. You just weren't listening. Back home, I hung my blouse in the hallway and stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled like fresh rain and distant magnolia. Ethan followed, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He sat beside me, and we watched the yard in comfortable silence. After a while, he asked, do you think they'll ever get it? I took a sip. Maybe. But I'm not waiting. He looked over at me. I love you, Gran. I smiled, soft and sure. I know. I love you too. The wedding day arrived with golden sunlight and soft skies, the kind of day people dream of for photos and first dances under rented lanterns. I wasn't invited. But I knew the time. I knew the venue. I could guess Lisa had arranged calla lilies and etched champagne flutes. I didn't put on the dress I bought. Didn't unwrap the shoes. Didn't smooth the lavender blouse I'd pressed weeks ago, back when I still believed in grace from that part of my family. Instead, I sat on the porch with a book and the locket James gave me on our 25th anniversary. Inside, a photo of Ethan curled beside one of James. Both smiling. Both loving me in their own ways. But I couldn't live inside someone else's version of what love meant anymore. At 9:14 a.m., the phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice cracked on the second word. Gran, I set my book aside. Take your time, sweetheart. I got the notice. About the trust. It's still locked? Yes. He sniffled. It says it'll stay frozen. Unless you request an amendment, personally, after the ceremony? That's right. Silence. Then, soft as breath, is there any way? I didn't answer right away. I let the weight of it settle. Not to punish him, never. That, but to teach. You told the truth, I said gently. But healing doesn't happen that fast. I know. It's not just about inviting you. His voice broke again. It's about choosing you, when no one else does. When it costs me something. I closed my eyes. Yes. I want to, Gran. I really do. I didn't know. You do now. So what happens next? You get married, I said. You make your promises. And you live them. And you, he asked. Voice small, I watch the sunset. I plant my dahlias. I answer the phone when people call me with truth in their voices. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm sorry. I know I love you. I never doubted that, I said. But no, sweetheart. Not today. He didn't argue. Didn't beg. That, too, was a kind of growth. The wedding happened. I didn't check for photos online. Didn't ask for updates. I wasn't interested in a story I hadn't been asked to be part of. But I heard things. Lisa's mother made a toast more about crystal patterns than connection. That the cake was lovely. The bride looked tense. And Mark. He was quiet all evening, like someone realizing too late that his hands had finally come back empty. That night, I pulled the quilt from the cedar chest. Yes, the quilt. The one I'd set at the curb weeks ago. Ruth had snuck over before the garbage truck came and rescued it, slipping it from the pile like it still mattered. I knew you weren't done with it, she'd said when she returned it, folding it gently and placing it back atop the cedar chest like a peace offering. I held it now, smoothed the stitches. I didn't feel rage anymore. Just a quiet knowing, they lost something. Not me, they lost the chance to know me. The next morning, I wrote a letter. Not to Ethan. To the scholarship board at the local community college. Please allow me to fund a nursing scholarship in memory of my husband, James Whitmore, RN, and in honor of the countless quiet women who loved families that eventually outgrew them. I sealed it. Stamped it. Set it by the door. Then I took the locket from around my neck. Opened it, removed Ethan's photo. I didn't throw it away. I tucked it gently into the red ledger. May 22nd, 2025. He said he's sorry. I believe him. But I won't offer forgiveness like a prize at a county fair. Love deserves more weight than that. That evening, the sun set without ceremony. Just a hush of pink that gave way to indigo. I didn't cry. I turned the porch light on. Poured myself a cup of cinnamon tea. And sat with my peace. It wasn't loud. It didn't knock. But it stayed.